The story of Fallout 4 begins not in the wasteland itself, but in a moment of fragile calm when the world still believed it had time. The Commonwealth, once known as Massachusetts, was a place shaped by old ambitions and quiet fears long before the bombs fell. Cities rose high with steel and glass. Suburban neighborhoods spread neatly along tree-lined streets, and beneath it all, unseen currents of anxiety flowed through everyday life. The threat of nuclear war hung in the air like distant thunder, spoken about on televisions and radio broadcasts, but rarely felt directly. People went to work, raised families, planned futures, and trusted that someone, somewhere, was keeping the world safe. It is within this fragile illusion of stability that Fallout 4 quietly plants its roots, showing a society standing on the edge of collapse without realizing how close the fall truly was. Vault-Tec emerged during this era as a symbol of reassurance, wrapped in cheerful branding. Vaults were marketed as salvation, bright promises of safety buried beneath the earth, offering families a chance to survive whatever catastrophe might come. But beneath the friendly mascots and reassuring slogans, Vault-Tec carried darker intentions. Their vaults were never simply shelters. They were experiments, each designed to test human behavior under carefully controlled conditions. In the Commonwealth, Vault 111 was presented as a standard cryogenic preservation facility meant to safeguard residents until the world was safe again. But like all Vault-Tec projects, the truth was far more complex. Vault 111 was not meant to protect humanity indefinitely. It was meant to observe it in frozen silence, reducing human lives to variables in a long-term experiment with no guarantee of awakening. On the morning the bombs fell, panic swept through the streets with terrifying speed. Sirens screamed warnings that came too late, and families fled toward Vault-Tec representatives who guided them with rehearsed calm. As the first nuclear detonations erupted in the distance, the world fractured in an instant. The sky burned, the earth shook, and civilization collapsed into fire and ash. Inside Vault 111, residents were sealed away from the destruction above, ushered into cryogenic pods under the promise of temporary sleep. But something went wrong. The vault's systems failed, the experiment collapsed into chaos, and the residents were left frozen for over 2 centuries, unaware that the world they knew had vanished forever. When the sole survivor awakens, they do so alone. Everyone else in the vault has perished, victims of system failures and human interference. The vault that once promised safety now feels like a tomb, cold and silent, its halls echoing with the hum of broken machinery. Stepping out into the Commonwealth for the first time is not a triumphant return to life, but a quiet, devastating realization. The world has moved on without you. The suburbs have crumbled. Nature has reclaimed streets and homes. Radiation has reshaped life itself, and the people who remain have built new societies atop the bones of the old one, carrying fragments of pre-war culture without fully understanding its origins. Sanctuary Hills, once a peaceful neighborhood filled with laughter and routine, now stands in ruin. Houses lean at odd angles, roofs collapsed, and memories cling stubbornly to cracked walls. It is here that Fallout 4 begins to explore one of its central themes: loss. Not only the loss of people, but the loss of time, of identity, of certainty. The sole survivor walks through a world that feels familiar yet deeply alien, haunted by echoes of a life that no longer exists. Objects once mundane, a child's bedroom, a kitchen table, a backyard fence, now feel sacred, frozen reminders of a vanished era. As the Commonwealth unfolds, it reveals a land shaped by conflict and survival. raider gangs roam the highways, forming loose societies built on violence and fear. Settlements cling to existence through cooperation and desperation, protected by walls, turrets, and hope more than strength. Amid this chaos, the Minutemen emerge as a fragile ideal, inspired by the revolutionary militia of the region's past. The Minutemen believe in mutual defense, in the idea that people can still protect one another if they choose unity over isolation. But when the sole survivor encounters them, they are barely holding together, their leadership fractured and their morale shattered. They are not heroes. They are survivors struggling to remember what heroism once meant. Opposing this fragile hope is the looming presence of the Institute, a shadowy organization hidden deep beneath the ruins of the Commonwealth Institute of Technology. The Institute represents one of Fallout 4's most unsettling questions. What does it mean to be human? Their scientists survived the Great War by retreating underground, where generations passed in isolation. Over time, they developed technologies far beyond anything seen on the surface, including synthetic humans known as synths. These creations blur the line between machine and person, capable of emotion, thought, and self-awareness. To the Institute, synths are tools, replaceable and controlled. To many on the surface, synths are monsters or imposters, and to some, they are people deserving of freedom. The Railroad rises in opposition to the Institute's control, dedicating itself to rescuing escaped synths and helping them build new lives. Operating in secrecy, the Railroad believes that sentience, not origin, defines personhood. Their struggle is quiet and dangerous, fought through code phrases, hidden safe houses, and erased memories. Each rescued synth carries the weight of uncertainty, never knowing if they will be hunted, discovered, or betrayed. The Railroad's mission forces the sole survivor to confront uncomfortable truths about identity and free will in a world where technology can perfectly imitate humanity. Meanwhile, the Brotherhood of Steel arrives in the Commonwealth aboard the Prydwen, a massive airship casting a long shadow over the region. The Brotherhood believes technology must be controlled, fearing that unchecked scientific advancement led to humanity's downfall. To them, synths are abominations, dangerous reminders of hubris. Their arrival brings order and power, but also rigidity and intolerance. The Brotherhood's vision of the future is one of control, hierarchy, and sacrifice, where safety is achieved through dominance rather than cooperation. At the heart of Fallout 4 lies a deeply personal story woven into this broader conflict. The search for Sean, the sole survivor's child, becomes both a literal journey and a metaphorical one. As the years stretch between parent and child, the idea of family itself becomes distorted by time. When the truth is finally revealed, it challenges everything the sole survivor believes about responsibility, legacy, and love. Sean has grown into someone shaped entirely by a world his parent never experienced. He represents the future born from the ashes of the past, carrying both the brilliance and the cold detachment of the institute that raised him. The Commonwealth itself feels alive with memory. Boston's skyline looms like a monument to ambition and decay. Fenway Park survives as Diamond City, a settlement built inside a stadium where the echoes of cheers have been replaced by market chatter and guarded hope. The Freedom Trail winds through ruins, guiding those who know how to listen. Old churches hide secrets beneath cracked stone floors. Factories hum faintly with machines that never fully stopped working. Every location tells a story, not through exposition, but through environmental detail. Skeletons frozen in moments of panic, terminals filled with unfinished messages, personal belongings scattered where people once stood. Fallout 4 does not rush its story. It invites you to wander, to listen, to piece together fragments of history at your own pace. The Commonwealth is not just a setting, it is a memory layered upon memory, shaped by fear, ambition, hope, and survival. The war destroyed the world in seconds, but its echoes linger centuries later, shaping every choice and every life that followed. And as you walk through the ruins, guided by flickering lights and distant radio songs, the world begins to feel strangely peaceful, not because it is safe, but because it has accepted what it has become. In this quiet acceptance, Fallout 4 finds its voice. A story not about rebuilding what was lost, but about deciding what deserves to be carried forward. And as the sole survivor takes their first steps into the Commonwealth, the journey unfolds slowly, gently, inviting you to drift alongside it, deeper into a world where the past sleeps beneath the soil and the future waits patiently to be shaped. As the sole survivor moves farther from the ruins of Sanctuary Hills, the Commonwealth begins to unfold not as a single wasteland, but as a patchwork of quiet stories layered atop one another, each shaped by survival, fear, and fragile hope. The roads are broken and overgrown, yet they still guide travelers along paths once carved by pre-war routine. Power lines sag overhead like tired veins, and distant radio towers blink faintly against the horizon, reminding anyone who looks up that communication still exists, even in a fractured world. Along these roads, small settlements have formed wherever people found shelter, water, or defensible ground. Each settlement feels temporary, as though its residents never fully believe it will last, yet they persist all the same, clinging to routines that echo the past. Concord stands as one of the Commonwealth's first lessons in this fragile persistence. Once a quiet colonial town, it now lies battered by time and conflict. Raiders roam its streets, treating history like debris beneath their boots. And yet, inside the Museum of Freedom, a small group of survivors remains trapped, protected by nothing more than boarded windows and determination. This moment introduces Preston Garvey and the last remnants of the Minutemen, a group whose ideals once defined the Commonwealth's spirit. The Minutemen were built on a simple belief that ordinary people, working together, could defend their homes. Over time, that belief eroded under betrayal, loss, and constant pressure from stronger factions. By the time the sole survivor meets them, the Minutemen are no longer an army or even a proper organization. They are an idea struggling to survive through a handful of exhausted people who refuse to give up entirely. The battle in Concord is not just a fight against raiders, but a symbolic moment where the past and present collide. When the sole survivor dons power armor and faces a deathclaw in the street below, it feels like the Commonwealth briefly remembers what heroism once looked like. But this moment is fleeting. The power armor drains quickly. The town remains in ruins. The victory does not restore the Minutemen to greatness overnight. Instead, it plants a seed, a quiet possibility that cooperation might still matter in a world dominated by fear. As settlements like Sanctuary are rebuilt piece by piece, Fallout 4 gently introduces one of its most defining mechanics: reconstruction. Building settlements is not about restoring the old world exactly as it was, but about shaping something new from the wreckage. Crops grow where lawns once lay, turrets replace white picket fences, generators hum softly through the night, powering lights that keep the darkness at bay. Each settlement becomes a reflection of the sole survivor's choices, a slow reclaiming of control in a world that once felt completely lost. These moments of building are quiet and meditative, contrasting sharply with the violence that surrounds them. Beyond these early settlements, the Commonwealth grows more complex. Diamond City rises at its heart, built within the walls of Fenway Park. Once a place of cheers and celebration, the stadium now shelters a bustling city where trade, politics, and paranoia intermingle. Diamond City is one of the safest places in the Commonwealth, yet it is also one of the most anxious. Fear of synth infiltration runs deep here. Residents whisper accusations, question one another's identities, and watch strangers with suspicion. The city's mayor enforces strict policies under the guise of protection, yet his leadership quietly reveals the influence of larger forces at play. The presence of synths casts a long shadow over the Commonwealth. To many, synths are monsters wearing human faces, capable of replacing loved ones without warning. Stories circulate of people vanishing overnight, only to return changed or not return at all. This fear creates division and cruelty, as communities struggle to define what makes someone truly human. Fallout 4 does not offer simple answers. Instead, it places the player inside this fear, forcing them to witness its consequences through broken families, secret executions, and desperate attempts to cling to certainty in an uncertain world. While Diamond City thrives within its walls, the areas beyond remain wild and unpredictable. Super mutants roam highways and ruins, grotesque remnants of pre-war experimentation. These creatures were once human, transformed by the forced evolutionary virus into something stronger and more violent, but stripped of identity and memory. Their presence serves as a constant reminder of how scientific ambition, unchecked by empathy, can erase humanity entirely. Their camps are scattered with crude fortifications and ritualistic displays, offering glimpses into a culture built on survival and domination rather than understanding. Amid this chaos, smaller stories quietly unfold. Travelers seek lost loved ones. Settlers fight off raiders for another night of peace. Scavengers dig through ruins, hoping to find something valuable enough to justify the risk. Terminals glow faintly in abandoned buildings, preserving fragments of pre-war lives, emails between coworkers, diary entries written in moments of fear, automated messages that never reach their recipients. These stories are never forced upon the player. They exist in the background, waiting to be discovered, rewarding patience and curiosity with quiet emotional weight. The Commonwealth's landscape itself feels alive with memory. Old highways curve through overgrown forests, swamps bubble softly with radioactive decay, factories hum with machines that never fully shut down. Even the sky feels different here, heavy with clouds that roll slowly across the horizon, casting long shadows over ruins and settlements alike. The weather shifts gently, sometimes washing the land in rain that muffles sound and softens edges, sometimes bathing everything in harsh sunlight that reveals every crack and scar. As the sole survivor travels deeper into the Commonwealth, the search for Sean becomes both more urgent and more complicated. Clues surface slowly, often through conversations with people who barely remember the world before the war. Nick Valentine, a synth detective operating out of Diamond City, becomes a key figure in this search. Nick is a walking contradiction, part machine, part memory of a pre-war human whose personality was imprinted into a synthetic body. He embodies one of Fallout 4's central questions. If someone thinks, feels, remembers, and chooses, does their origin truly matter? Nick's existence challenges the player to confront their assumptions. He experiences nostalgia for a life he never lived, carrying memories that are not his own yet feel deeply personal. His presence blurs the line between human and synth in ways that feel gentle rather than threatening. Through Nick, Fallout 4 invites empathy, asking players to look beyond fear and consider the emotional reality of beings created through technology. The journey toward uncovering Sean's fate leads the sole survivor into increasingly dangerous territory where the Commonwealth's factions begin to take notice. Rumors of the Institute surface more frequently, whispered by frightened settlers and spoken cautiously by those who claim to know the truth. The Institute becomes a kind of myth, a hidden enemy responsible for disappearances, replacements, and the creation of synths. No one seems to know exactly where it is or how it operates, only that it watches from the shadows, influencing the Commonwealth without ever fully revealing itself. This sense of being observed adds to Fallout 4's quiet tension. Cameras line old streets, watchful eyes peer from ruined buildings. The feeling that someone, somewhere, is monitoring events never fully fades, yet the game rarely turns this tension into immediate threat. Instead, it simmers beneath the surface, creating a low hum of unease that follows the player through even the calmest moments. Through it all, Fallout 4 maintains a deliberate pace. It allows long stretches of exploration where nothing dramatic happens, just walking, listening, and absorbing the world. Radio stations play songs from a lost era, their cheerful melodies contrasting gently with the ruins outside. The music becomes a companion, a reminder that culture survives even when civilization does not. These moments of quiet wandering are where Fallout 4 truly becomes a sleep story, inviting the listener to drift alongside the sole survivor through a world shaped by memory and choice. As the journey through the Commonwealth continues, the world begins to reveal itself less through grand revelations and more through quiet patterns, routines, and repeated struggles that define daily life after the war. The further one travels from Sanctuary and Diamond City, the more apparent it becomes that survival in Fallout 4 is not about rebuilding civilization all at once, but about enduring each day with small victories that barely register as progress. Settlements are often little more than clusters of shacks and barricades built from scavenged metal and broken wood. Yet within them, people create meaning through habits that mirror the old world. Farmers tend crops that grow stubbornly in irradiated soil. Guards walk slow patrols through the night, and traders travel dangerous roads to exchange goods and stories. These routines give the Commonwealth a steady rhythm, a gentle pulse that continues even when danger lurks just beyond the walls. Among the most quietly important places in the Commonwealth are the old world ruins repurposed by survivors. Drive-in theaters become fortified settlements, shipwrecks turn into homes, overpasses shelter traders and mercenaries. These reused spaces reflect humanity's instinct to adapt rather than surrender. Each structure tells two stories at once, what it once was and what it has become. Fallout 4 rarely explains these transformations directly, instead allowing the player to observe the details left behind: chairs arranged in circles, handwritten signs warning of danger, makeshift memorials honoring those who didn't survive. These small details accumulate, creating a sense that the world is constantly mourning while still moving forward. The presence of the Minutemen grows slowly during this time, not as a dominant force, but as a scattered network of people choosing cooperation over isolation. Their radio broadcasts crackle across the Commonwealth, offering assistance where possible and calling for aid when needed. Each request feels personal, grounded in survival rather than ideology. A settlement under attack, crops stolen, defenses failing. These moments reinforce the Minutemen's identity not as conquerors or rulers, but as caretakers trying to preserve a fragile sense of community. The sole survivor's involvement with them is less about command and more about responsibility, stepping into a role that demands patience rather than glory. Beyond the influence of the Minutemen, the Commonwealth grows darker and more complex. Raider gangs occupy ruined factories and subway tunnels, creating brutal micro-societies built on fear and domination. Their camps are chaotic, filled with improvised traps, graffiti, and displays meant to intimidate. Yet even among raiders, fragments of humanity surface. Notes reveal internal conflicts, regrets, and moments of doubt. Some raiders were once settlers who lost everything. Others grew up knowing nothing but violence. Fallout 4 never excuses their actions, but it quietly acknowledges that the line between survivor and monster is often shaped by circumstance. Super mutants add another layer of tragedy to the landscape. Their towering forms and aggressive behavior make them constant threats, yet their origins are rooted in scientific arrogance rather than malice. Created through forced experimentation, super mutants represent humanity, stripped of choice, turned into weapons by people who believed progress justified cruelty. Their camps, littered with remains and crude decorations, feel less like organized strongholds and more like echoes of broken minds trying to impose structure on chaos. Occasionally, their dialogue hints at confusion, flashes of memory, or longing for something they cannot name. These moments pass quickly, but they leave behind an uncomfortable reminder that even the Commonwealth's most feared creatures were once human. As the sole survivor continues searching for Sean, the trail leads deeper into the world of hidden knowledge and forgotten systems. Pre-war research facilities dot the Commonwealth, each one sealed behind security systems that still hum faintly with power. Inside, terminals glow softly, preserving conversations between scientists who believed they were changing the world for the better. Many of these facilities focused on energy production, automation, or biological enhancement, reflecting a society obsessed with efficiency and control. Their downfall came not from lack of intelligence, but from the absence of restraint. Fallout 4 uses these spaces to quietly critique the pre-war mindset, showing how ambition without empathy led directly to the world's collapse. Nick Valentine's investigation into Sean's disappearance introduces a different kind of journey, one rooted in memory rather than geography. As a synth carrying the personality of a pre-war detective, Nick exists in a state of constant contradiction. He remembers streets that no longer exist, crimes that will never be solved, and a city that vanished centuries ago. His office in Diamond City feels like a preserved fragment of another era, complete with worn furniture and faded files. Through Nick, Fallout 4 explores the idea that memory itself can be a burden, especially when it belongs to a world that no longer has a place for it. Nick's presence challenges the Commonwealth's fear of synths in a way that feels quiet and personal. He does not demand acceptance. He simply exists, helping people solve problems, listening to their stories, and offering calm perspective in moments of crisis. His identity raises questions that the Commonwealth is not ready to answer. If a synth can remember, care, and choose, what truly separates them from humans? Fallout 4 does not resolve this question quickly. Instead, it allows it to linger, shaping interactions and decisions throughout the story. The trail eventually leads to Kellogg, a mercenary whose life reflects the brutal adaptability required to survive the wasteland. Kellogg's story is revealed slowly, through memories accessed in fragmented flashes. His past shows a man shaped by loss, hardened by necessity, and sustained by technology that extended his life far beyond what should have been possible. Kellogg is not portrayed as a villain driven by ideology, but as someone who made choices in a world that offered few alternatives. His long life, artificially prolonged, serves as a quiet warning about the cost of clinging to the past rather than allowing time to move forward. Through Kellogg's memories, the truth about Sean begins to take shape, twisting the sole survivor's understanding of time itself. The realization that decades have passed while the protagonist remained frozen reframes the entire journey. The search for a missing child becomes a confrontation with lost years, altered relationships, and the uncomfortable truth that time does not wait for anyone, no matter how much they wish it would. Fallout 4 handles this revelation gently, allowing the emotional weight to settle rather than overwhelming the player with spectacle. As the Commonwealth opens further, the Institute's influence becomes increasingly apparent. Synth sightings increase, disappearances feel more frequent, fear spreads quietly through settlements. The Institute is rarely seen, but constantly felt, like a presence just beyond reach. This distant menace creates a tension that never fully erupts, reinforcing the idea that the greatest threats in Fallout 4 are not always visible. Sometimes they exist in the uncertainty, in the unanswered questions, in the feeling that someone else is shaping the future from behind closed doors. Despite this tension, moments of peace continue to surface. The radio plays old songs filled with optimism and charm. Sunsets cast warm light over ruined skylines. Companions share quiet conversations during long walks between locations. These moments ground the story, reminding the listener that beauty and calm still exist even in a broken world. Fallout 4 excels at these gentle pauses, allowing the player to breathe, to wander, and to simply exist within the Commonwealth without urgency. The world feels vast yet intimate, shaped not only by major factions, but by countless individual stories unfolding quietly in the background. Every terminal entry, every abandoned home, every nameless skeleton tells a fragment of a larger narrative about survival, loss, and adaptation. Fallout 4 does not rush to define what the Commonwealth should become. Instead, it allows the future to remain uncertain, shaped by choices made slowly, deliberately, and often imperfectly. As the sole survivor continues forward, the journey becomes less about returning to the past and more about understanding the present. The Commonwealth is no longer just a reminder of what was lost. It becomes a living place, filled with people trying to define what comes next. And in this slow, thoughtful unfolding, Fallout 4 invites the listener to drift alongside it, carried gently through ruins and memories toward a future still waiting to be written. As the sole survivor presses deeper into the Commonwealth, the land begins to feel less like a collection of locations and more like a single, breathing entity shaped by countless choices made long before the bombs fell. The ruins no longer feel random. Roads curve toward places that once mattered. Power stations hum faintly beneath layers of rust and neglect. Even the broken skyline of Boston feels intentional, as though the city itself is quietly guiding travelers along paths shaped by memory rather than chance. Walking through these spaces becomes a slow act of listening, of letting the environment speak through collapsed walls, flickering lights, and terminals that still glow with unfinished thoughts. The deeper the journey goes, the more Fallout 4 reveals how tightly the present is bound to the pre-war world. Many of the Commonwealth's problems are not new struggles born from the apocalypse, but echoes of unresolved conflicts that existed long before the Great War. Corporate greed, political fear, scientific obsession, and social inequality all survived the bombs in altered forms. Raider gangs mirror old hierarchies of power. Mercenaries replace private security firms. Settlements replicate suburban divisions, separating wealth from poverty even in a world reduced to rubble. Fallout 4 does not frame the apocalypse as a clean reset, but as a continuation, where humanity carries its flaws forward alongside its resilience. This continuity becomes especially apparent when exploring pre-war military installations and research facilities scattered across the Commonwealth. These places are often sealed behind security measures that still function centuries later, guarding secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. Inside, the air feels heavy with anticipation, as though the building itself remembers its purpose. Terminals recount frantic last days, scientists arguing over ethical boundaries, soldiers following orders they barely understood. Many of these facilities were working on technologies meant to ensure survival or dominance, yet they all failed in the same way by assuming control could replace compassion. Fallout 4 uses these environments to quietly reflect on how easily progress can become destruction when empathy is removed from the equation. The Institute looms larger during this time, not through direct confrontation, but through subtle influence. Evidence of their reach appears everywhere. Synth components recovered from fallen enemies, whispered rumors in settlements, and carefully erased records that hint at manipulation from afar. The Institute's greatest weapon is not its technology, but its secrecy. By remaining unseen, it allows fear to grow unchecked, turning communities against one another. The Commonwealth becomes a place where suspicion feels safer than trust, and Fallout 4 makes the listener feel the emotional cost of that mindset through fractured relationships and constant unease. As the sole survivor learns more about the Institute, the story shifts from mystery to moral tension. The Institute is not a mindless evil, nor is it a purely benevolent force. It is a society shaped by isolation, convinced that the surface world is too chaotic to be saved. Their scientists view themselves as humanity's last hope, preserving knowledge and advancing technology in preparation for a future they believe only they can control. Yet this belief strips away empathy, reducing individuals, both human and synth, to variables in an equation. Fallout 4 presents this philosophy calmly, allowing the listener to sit with its implications rather than condemning it outright. Synths remain at the center of this conflict, embodying the blurred boundary between creation and life. Many synths living on the surface have no knowledge of their origin. They farm, trade, build relationships, and dream without realizing they were manufactured rather than born. When their true nature is revealed, the reaction is often violent, not because of what they have done, but because of what they are perceived to be. Fallout 4 quietly challenges the listener to question whether identity is defined by origin or by experience. The game never forces a single answer, instead allowing the question to linger in moments of silence and reflection. The Railroad's struggle continues in parallel, operating quietly beneath the Commonwealth's surface. Their hideouts feel transient, constantly shifting to avoid detection. Passwords change, routes disappear, trust is earned slowly and tested often. The Railroad does not promise safety or certainty, only the possibility of freedom. Their work is slow and dangerous, focused on individuals rather than grand victories. Fallout 4 uses the Railroad to emphasize the power of small acts of defiance in a world shaped by overwhelming systems. Each rescued synth represents a single choice to value life over control, even when the outcome is uncertain. While these ideological battles unfold, everyday life in the Commonwealth continues with stubborn persistence. Settlers wake before dawn to tend crops. Traders set out along dangerous roads with guarded optimism. Children grow up knowing nothing but the wasteland, inventing games among ruins, and learning survival as naturally as language. These moments ground Fallout 4's larger themes, reminding the listener that beneath every faction and philosophy are ordinary people trying to live another day. The Commonwealth survives not through grand plans, but through countless small decisions made quietly and repeatedly. The Brotherhood of Steel's presence intensifies this tension further. Their patrols march through the Commonwealth with discipline and purpose, enforcing their vision of order wherever they go. To some, they represent safety and structure. To others, they embody intolerance and control. The Brotherhood's rigid belief that advanced technology must be contained at all costs leads them to view synths as threats rather than beings. Fallout 4 presents the Brotherhood's philosophy with calm clarity, allowing the listener to understand its appeal without ignoring its consequences. Their certainty offers comfort in a chaotic world, but that certainty leaves little room for compassion or nuance. Amid these powerful forces, the sole survivor remains an outsider, someone from the past, navigating a future shaped by unfamiliar rules. This perspective allows the listener to experience the Commonwealth with a sense of gentle detachment. The world feels both intimate and distant, filled with familiar objects that no longer serve their original purpose. Pre-war toys sit untouched on shelves. Old advertisements fade slowly from cracked walls. Radios continue to broadcast cheerful songs to audiences that barely remember the world they describe. These details create a soft melancholy that permeates every corner of Fallout 4, turning exploration into a meditative experience. Time itself becomes a recurring theme as the journey unfolds. The sole survivor is a living contradiction, someone frozen in time, awakened in a world that has aged without them. Conversations often reveal generational gaps that feel impossible to bridge. References to history feel distorted, remembered incorrectly, or mythologized beyond recognition. The past becomes something fluid, shaped by memory rather than accuracy. Fallout 4 allows these inconsistencies to exist naturally, reflecting how stories evolve when truth is passed down through survivors rather than records. There are moments of unexpected peace scattered throughout this journey, watching the sun rise over the ruins of Boston, listening to companions share stories during long walks, sitting quietly in a settlement as generators hum and lights flicker on one by one. These moments feel intentionally unhurried, inviting the listener to pause and rest within the world rather than rush through it. Fallout 4 excels at these pauses, creating space for reflection and calm even amid danger. As the sole survivor continues forward, the search for Sean becomes less about urgency and more about understanding. The idea of family stretches and reshapes itself under the weight of time. What does it mean to protect someone who has grown beyond you? How do you reconcile love with ideological difference? Fallout 4 treats these questions gently, allowing emotional complexity to exist without resolution. The story does not demand certainty, it invites contemplation. The Commonwealth, in all its ruin and resilience, begins to feel like a place that no longer needs saving in the traditional sense. It does not wait for a hero to restore the past. Instead, it offers the chance to shape something new. However imperfect, the future remains unwritten, guided by choices made slowly and thoughtfully. And as the journey continues, the world opens itself further, revealing deeper layers of history, philosophy, and quiet beauty, each one waiting patiently to be discovered. In this gentle unfolding, Fallout 4 becomes less a tale of apocalypse and more a meditation on continuity, a story about what survives when everything else falls away, a reminder that even after the end of the world, life continues in soft, persistent ways, carried forward by memory, choice, and the quiet determination to keep going. As the path forward stretches deeper into the Commonwealth, the sense of scale begins to soften into something more personal, more reflective, as though the world itself is inviting the sole survivor to slow down and truly see it rather than simply move through it. The ruins no longer feel like obstacles to overcome, but like memories laid out gently across the land, waiting to be acknowledged. Each broken neighborhood carries its own quiet atmosphere, shaped not only by what happened there during the war, but by how people tried to live afterward. Some places feel hurried and desperate, thrown together out of fear. Others feel patient, shaped slowly by hands that believe tomorrow might come. Walking through these spaces becomes less about destination and more about presence, about letting the Commonwealth unfold at its own calm pace. The settlements scattered across the region begin to feel like small islands of humanity floating in a sea of uncertainty. Each one develops its own rhythm, its own personality. Some thrive through cooperation, sharing food, defense, and responsibility. Others barely hold together, relying on scavenging and luck to survive another week. The act of helping these communities rebuild is quiet and repetitive, but deeply symbolic. It reflects the idea that civilization does not return through dramatic moments, but through consistent care. A water pump placed here, a wall repaired there, lights turning on one by one as dusk settles. These small acts accumulate, slowly reshaping the wasteland into something that feels lived in rather than abandoned. As trust grows between settlements, trade routes form naturally, connecting distant corners of the Commonwealth. Caravans move cautiously along cracked roads, their guards scanning the horizon, while Brahmin plod forward with steady patience. These routes are fragile, vulnerable to attack, yet they persist, forming the backbone of a new economy. With trade comes information. Stories spread of places reclaimed, dangers avoided, and rumors of unseen forces watching from below. The Commonwealth becomes a web of shared knowledge, stitched together by people who understand that isolation leads only to extinction. During this time, the railroad's influence continues quietly in the background, rarely announcing itself, yet shaping events in subtle ways. Safe houses appear and disappear. Old churches and forgotten tunnels hide lives in transition. Synths seeking freedom move carefully, guided by coded messages and whispered instructions. The railroad's operations feel fragile by design, built on trust rather than power. Their work emphasizes patience over speed, secrecy over recognition. Fallout 4 presents their mission not as a rebellion meant to overthrow the world, but as a quiet effort to preserve dignity one life at a time. The Institute, meanwhile, remains distant yet constant, like a presence just beyond vision. Even when unseen, its influence is felt in the fear that grips settlements when someone disappears without explanation. A neighbor vanishes overnight, a friend begins acting strangely, accusations arise, trust fractures, and paranoia spreads. Fallout 4 captures this tension without spectacle, allowing it to simmer gently beneath daily life. The Institute does not need to attack openly. The uncertainty alone is enough to destabilize communities. This psychological weight becomes one of the game's most powerful narrative tools, reinforcing the idea that control is often most effective when it remains invisible. Exploration during this stage of the journey feels more contemplative. The sole survivor begins to notice patterns in the world, how certain places attract conflict, while others remain untouched, how nature reclaims spaces differently depending on what once stood there. Schools feel heavy with silence. Hospitals hum faintly with machines that never fully shut down. Office buildings hold rows of desks frozen in time, terminals still open to unfinished work. These locations do not tell their stories through dialogue, but through arrangement and absence. Fallout 4 trusts the listener to interpret these spaces emotionally rather than intellectually. Companions play an increasingly important role in shaping the experience of the Commonwealth. Each one carries their own history, shaped by the post-war world in different ways. Some are driven by duty, others by guilt, curiosity, or loyalty. Traveling alongside them reveals small moments of vulnerability, shared observations about ruins, reflections on choices made, quiet comments triggered by familiar places. These interactions are never rushed. They unfold slowly, allowing emotional connections to develop naturally. Companions become anchors in the vastness of the Commonwealth, grounding the journey in shared experience rather than solitude. The theme of choice grows more pronounced as the sole survivor becomes more deeply involved in the Commonwealth's future. Decisions rarely feel clean or final. Helping one group may strain relations with another. Acts of protection can unintentionally invite retaliation. Fallout 4 presents these dilemmas without urgency, encouraging reflection rather than reaction. The absence of a clear moral compass reinforces the idea that the wasteland is not governed by absolutes. Instead, it is shaped by context, consequence, and intent. As knowledge of the Institute deepens, its internal contradictions begin to surface. Despite its advanced technology and controlled environment, the Institute struggles with the same human flaws as the surface world: fear, pride, division. Its scientists debate ethics in sterile rooms, insulated from the suffering above, convinced that distance justifies detachment. Fallout 4 portrays the Institute not as monsters, but as people who chose certainty over empathy. Their isolation preserved knowledge but eroded understanding, creating a society brilliant yet emotionally distant. The sole survivor's connection to Sean complicates this conflict further. The idea of family becomes entangled with ideology, forcing difficult questions about responsibility and legacy. Sean is no longer just a missing child. He is a product of the world that raised him. His beliefs reflect the Institute's values, shaped by logic and long-term planning rather than emotional attachment. Fallout 4 handles this relationship gently, allowing tension to exist without melodrama. The weight of time, the distance between parent and child, settles slowly rather than erupting all at once. Throughout these developments, the Commonwealth continues its quiet routines. Crops grow, generators hum, guards change shifts. Life persists in small, reliable patterns. The radio remains a constant presence, its songs floating gently through ruined streets and open fields. These melodies offer comfort, nostalgia, and a sense of continuity, bridging the gap between past and present. They remind the listener that culture survives even when structures collapse, carried forward through memory and sound. There are moments when the world feels almost peaceful, standing on a hill at sunset, watching light spill across broken rooftops, walking through forests where nature has softened the scars of war, sitting beside a settlement at night as lights flicker on and voices drift softly through the air. Fallout 4 leans into these moments, allowing silence and stillness to exist without interruption. They are not rewards or breaks from the story. They are the story, woven into its fabric. As the journey continues, the sole survivor's role becomes less defined by urgency and more by influence. The Commonwealth does not demand immediate salvation. It responds gradually, shaped by consistent presence and thoughtful action. The sense of being out of time begins to fade, replaced by a sense of belonging not to the past, but to this new, imperfect world. Fallout 4 frames this transition gently, allowing the listener to settle into the rhythm of the wasteland rather than fight against it. The deeper truth of the Commonwealth emerges quietly. Survival is not about restoring what was lost, but about choosing what matters now. The ruins will never fully disappear, the scars will remain, but within them, people continue to build, remember, and hope. And as the sole survivor walks onward through this evolving landscape, the world opens itself further, revealing layers of meaning that reward patience and reflection. In this slow unfolding, Fallout 4 becomes a story not of endings, but of continuance, a meditation on time, memory, and the quiet strength required to move forward when the past cannot be reclaimed. The Commonwealth does not ask to be saved, it asks to be understood, and in understanding it, the listener is invited to rest within its gentle, persistent rhythm, carried forward by the soft certainty that life, in all its fragile forms, endures. The Commonwealth continues to open itself in layers, not through dramatic shifts, but through a slow accumulation of understanding, as if the land itself is allowing the sole survivor to settle into its rhythm before revealing anything deeper. By now, the roads feel familiar, even comforting in their broken predictability. You begin to recognize the way certain stretches grow quiet at dusk, how the wind moves differently through ruined neighborhoods than it does across open fields, how the hum of distant generators blends with insect sounds to create a steady nighttime lull. These sensations become part of daily life, grounding the journey in subtle consistency rather than urgency. As involvement with the Commonwealth deepens, the idea of leadership takes on a different meaning. It becomes clear that influence here is not enforced through authority, but earned through reliability. Settlers do not follow because they are told to. They follow because someone showed up when it mattered. Over time, this trust reshapes how the world responds. Settlements feel less isolated. Guards stand a little straighter. Trade routes grow slightly safer. These changes are quiet, almost invisible unless you pay close attention. Yet they form the backbone of stability in a world that has known nothing but collapse. The Minutemen, fragile as they are, begin to feel less like a faction and more like a shared agreement between people who choose to help one another. Their radio broadcasts crackle with calm voices, offering assistance, not commands. Each message feels grounded, human, shaped by need rather than ambition. Fallout 4 presents this rebuilding as a slow, imperfect process, reminding the listener that progress does not arrive all at once. It emerges gradually, through patience and repetition, through showing up again and again, even when outcomes are uncertain. Beyond the safety of settlements, the Commonwealth remains vast and unpredictable. Vast industrial zones stretch outward, filled with factories that once powered the region's economy. Inside these rusted structures, machines still hum faintly, operating on forgotten schedules. Conveyor belts move nothing, lights flicker above empty workstations. Fallout 4 uses these places to illustrate the disconnect between purpose and outcome, how systems built to sustain life continued functioning long after they lost their reason. Exploring these spaces feels almost meditative, as if walking through the dreams of a world that never woke up. The deeper one travels into these industrial ruins, the more evident it becomes that the pre-war world placed immense faith in automation. Robots once filled roles meant to ease human labor, yet after the war, they remained trapped in routines with no context. Protectrons patrol empty hallways. Mr. Handy's repeat greetings to no one. Some machines respond warmly to interaction, while others attack without hesitation, unable to adapt beyond their programming. These encounters serve as quiet reminders that technology without guidance can persist blindly, neither good nor evil, simply continuing because it was told to. As the sole survivor becomes more visible within the Commonwealth, companions begin to reflect on the changes taking place. Conversations during travel shift from surface observations to deeper reflections about purpose and belonging. Some companions speak of regret, others of hope, others of resignation. These dialogues unfold gently, triggered by environments rather than plot points, reinforcing the sense that the world is alive with thought, even when nothing dramatic is happening. Companions do not rush to conclusions. They sit with uncertainty, mirroring the listener's own gradual understanding of the Commonwealth. The Brotherhood of Steel's influence becomes more pronounced during this period. Their patrols grow more frequent, their presence more assertive, their technology more visible. Vertibirds roar overhead, briefly breaking the Commonwealth's quiet before fading into the distance. Their arrival changes the atmosphere wherever they go, introducing structure and tension in equal measure. To some settlers, the Brotherhood represents safety. To others, it feels like occupation. Fallout 4 allows both interpretations to exist simultaneously, never insisting on a single emotional response. Within Brotherhood-controlled areas, the world feels sharper, more rigid. Orders are followed, technology is cataloged, threats are eliminated decisively. Yet beneath this discipline lies an undercurrent of fear. Fear of losing control, fear of repeating the mistakes of the past. The Brotherhood's distrust of synths is absolute, leaving no room for nuance. This certainty offers comfort in a chaotic world, but it also erases individuality. Fallout 4 presents this ideology calmly, letting the listener feel its appeal without ignoring its cost. At the same time, the Railroad continues its quiet work, moving through the Commonwealth like a whisper rather than a force. Their operations feel fragile by design, constantly adapting, constantly hiding. The Railroad believes survival depends not on strength, but on discretion. Their members speak in coded language, trusting few and testing many. Each rescued synth becomes a small victory, measured not in territory gained, but in a life preserved. Fallout 4 frames these actions as deeply personal, emphasizing emotional consequence over strategic gain. As the sole survivor learns more about synths, the concept of identity becomes increasingly fluid. Encounters with synth individuals challenge assumptions repeatedly. Some fear their own existence once the truth is revealed. Others accept it calmly, valuing their lived experiences over their origins. These moments are never rushed. Fallout 4 allows silence to fill the space after revelations, giving weight to reflection rather than reaction. The question of what it means to be human remains unanswered, lingering softly in every interaction. The Institute's role in shaping these tensions becomes clearer, though still distant. Their actions ripple outward, affecting lives they never see. Their technology reshapes the Commonwealth while their presence remains hidden. This separation reinforces the theme of detachment that defines the Institute's philosophy. They believe they are preserving humanity by isolating themselves from it. Fallout 4 presents this contradiction without condemnation, allowing the listener to recognize its quiet tragedy. As the sole survivor approaches the Institute more closely, the story's emotional core shifts. The search for Sean becomes less about rescue and more about reconciliation. Time has reshaped everything. The idea of returning to what was is no longer possible. Fallout 4 treats this realization gently, allowing acceptance to grow slowly rather than forcing resolution. The relationship between parent and child becomes a reflection of the world itself, familiar yet changed, connected yet distant. Despite these heavy themes, the Commonwealth never loses its capacity for calm. Sunlight still filters through trees, rain still softens the landscape, radio songs still play, cheerful and nostalgic. These sensory details ground the experience, preventing the story from becoming overwhelming. Fallout 4 understands the importance of rest, of moments where nothing needs to be decided. These pauses are not distractions from the narrative, they are essential to it. As night falls across the Commonwealth, settlements glow softly against the darkness. Guards take their posts, fires crackle, conversations drift quietly through the air. In these moments, the world feels stable, even safe, not because danger is gone, but because people have learned how to live alongside it. The wasteland no longer feels hostile by default. It feels familiar, shaped by shared effort and quiet resilience. The sole survivor's journey continues not toward a singular climax, but toward deeper understanding. The Commonwealth does not demand answers immediately. It allows time to stretch, inviting contemplation. Fallout 4 becomes less about resolving conflict and more about choosing how to exist within it. Every path forward carries compromise. Every alliance carries consequence. Yet within these complexities, there is comfort in the knowledge that life persists, adapting gently, stubbornly, beautifully. In this steady unfolding, the world feels ready to be listened to rather than conquered. The ruins speak softly, the people endure patiently, the future remains open, shaped by care rather than force. And as the journey moves forward, the Commonwealth continues to offer its quiet companionship, guiding the listener deeper into a world where survival is not defined by victory, but by continuity, memory, and the simple act of moving forward together. The Commonwealth settles into a familiar hush as time continues to pass, the kind of quiet that only forms after danger has become expected rather than shocking. By now, the ruins feel less threatening and more contemplative, as though the world has accepted its own broken shape and invites others to do the same. The cracked highways no longer seem like scars, but like long, winding reminders of movement and connection, stretching across the land with patient indifference. Traveling them becomes a meditative act, each step carrying the weight of the past without being crushed by it. With deeper familiarity comes a clearer understanding of how the Commonwealth truly survives. It is not through strength alone, nor through technology, but through adaptability. People here learn to live with uncertainty rather than fight it. They plan knowing plans may fail. They build knowing structures may fall, and yet they continue, guided by the belief that effort itself carries meaning. Fallout 4 reflects this mindset in every settlement that grows slowly, imperfectly, never becoming what it once was, yet becoming something real all the same. As the sole survivor becomes a steady presence, interactions shift subtly. Settlers speak with less fear and more familiarity. Traders greet with recognition instead of suspicion. Companions comment on how places change over time, not dramatically, but just enough to be felt. These changes are quiet rewards, never announced, never celebrated loudly. They exist as gentle affirmations that presence matters, that consistency shapes the world more effectively than force ever could. The further one wanders, the more the Commonwealth's history reveals itself through silence rather than explanation. Entire neighborhoods sit untouched, their doors never opened, their stories sealed behind dust and decay. Some houses feel hurried, as though people fled mid-conversation. Others feel calm, as though their occupants accepted what was coming and chose to remain. Fallout 4 never clarifies which is worse. It allows the listener to sit with the ambiguity, to feel the emotional weight without resolving it. Old schools and libraries carry a particularly heavy stillness. Books remain on shelves, knowledge preserved, yet unused. Chalkboards display unfinished lessons. Classrooms echo faintly with the absence of voices that once filled them. These places speak softly about lost futures rather than lost lives, about generations that never had the chance to grow into the world they were promised. Fallout 4 does not linger on these spaces for shock value. It allows them to exist gently, as quiet memorials to possibility rather than tragedy alone. The Institute's shadow continues to stretch across the Commonwealth, felt even when unseen. Its technology represents what humanity could become if it abandons emotional connection in favor of precision and control. Yet even within the Institute, contradictions exist. Its inhabitants live clean, ordered lives, insulated from the chaos above, yet many struggle with doubt and isolation. Their world is stable but sterile, safe yet distant. Fallout 4 presents this environment with restraint, allowing its cold calm to speak for itself. The deeper the Soul Survivor's understanding grows, the more complex the idea of progress becomes. The surface world is messy, violent, unpredictable, yet deeply human. The Institute is advanced, efficient, protected, yet emotionally restrained. Neither path offers a perfect answer. Fallout 4 resists framing the future as a single correct outcome, instead allowing each vision to exist in tension with the others. This ambiguity encourages reflection rather than judgment, aligning perfectly with the slow, thoughtful tone of the journey. Synths continue to embody this tension. Some find peace in accepting their origins, focusing on their present rather than their creation. Others struggle, haunted by questions of authenticity and autonomy. Fallout 4 treats these stories gently, allowing synth characters to express fear, hope, and confusion without forcing resolution. Their existence becomes less about what they are and more about how they choose to live, reinforcing the game's central meditation on identity. Throughout the Commonwealth, technology persists in strange, quiet ways. Generators hum endlessly, lights flicker on schedules long forgotten, automated announcements play to empty rooms. These systems feel like echoes rather than tools, remnants of a world that valued continuity even when continuity no longer made sense. Fallout 4 uses these details to create atmosphere rather than exposition, allowing the listener to feel the persistence of the past without being overwhelmed by it. The Brotherhood of Steel continues to impose order where it can, offering security through structure. Their presence is undeniable, their confidence steady, yet even among their ranks, doubt occasionally surfaces. Some members question the rigidity of their doctrine, the cost of their certainty. These moments are subtle, often brief, but they add depth to a faction often defined by strength alone. Fallout 4 allows these cracks to show without shattering the Brotherhood's image entirely. Moments of peace remain scattered generously throughout the journey, watching rain fall across irradiated fields, listening to wind move through rusted signs, sitting quietly as a settlement settles into nighttime routines. These moments are never framed as rewards. They simply exist, offering rest without demand. Fallout 4 understands that calm is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to coexist with it without constant tension. The radio remains a steady companion, its songs floating through the Commonwealth like echoes from another lifetime. The optimism in the music contrasts gently with the world outside, not mockingly, but comfortingly. These melodies become emotional anchors, connecting the listener to a past that, while flawed, still carried hope. Fallout 4 uses this contrast to soften its world, reminding the listener that joy and sorrow can coexist without canceling one another. As the Soul Survivor continues onward, the journey becomes increasingly internal. The search for answers shifts into a search for understanding. The world no longer feels like something to fix, but something to participate in. Fallout 4 encourages this shift subtly, allowing the listener to feel it rather than be told. The Commonwealth becomes less hostile and more familiar, shaped by repetition, memory, and quiet adaptation. Night settles gently across the land, stars visible through gaps in cloud cover, flickering faintly above ruined skylines. Fires glow softly in settlements. Guards speak in low voices. The world feels held together not by certainty, but by care. Fallout 4 thrives in these moments, allowing silence to speak louder than conflict ever could. The journey does not rush toward an ending. It stretches forward patiently, inviting continued exploration without urgency. The Commonwealth does not promise clarity or closure. It offers continuity, a chance to exist within its rhythms rather than escape them. And as the sole survivor moves onward, guided by memory rather than obligation, the world continues to unfold gently, revealing itself one quiet moment at a time. In this steady stillness, Fallout 4 becomes something more than a story of survival. It becomes a space to rest, to reflect, to drift alongside a world that has learned to endure without demanding perfection. A world shaped by loss, yes, but also by persistence, compassion, and the quiet belief that even after everything, life continues softly, stubbornly, beautifully. The Commonwealth feels calmer now, not because danger has disappeared, but because it has become familiar, woven into the landscape like weather that changes without asking permission. The sole survivor moves through this world with an ease that would have seemed impossible at the beginning of the journey. The tension that once tightened every step has softened into awareness, a quiet attentiveness shaped by experience rather than fear. The ruins no longer shout their history. They murmur it gently, allowing the listener to pass through without resistance. As days blend into one another, the idea of time itself becomes less rigid. Morning light spills across broken streets in slow waves, illuminating dust motes drifting through the air. Afternoon heat settles gently over fields where crops grow stubbornly despite the soil's scars. Night arrives without urgency, bringing with it a familiar hush broken only by insects, distant generators, and the low murmur of settlement life. Fallout 4 allows these cycles to exist unremarked, encouraging the listener to feel time rather than track it. The Commonwealth's people continue their lives within these rhythms. Farmers rise early, their routines shaped by weather and necessity. Guards take their posts with practiced calm, watching horizons they've learned to read instinctively. Traders move from place to place, carrying not just goods, but stories, news of settlements prospering, warnings of danger, quiet rumors that drift through the region like fog. These exchanges form the unseen connective tissue of the wasteland, binding distant lives together through shared knowledge. As involvement deepens, the sole survivor's presence begins to feel less like intervention and more like participation. Helping a settlement no longer feels like rescuing it from collapse, but like strengthening something already alive. The Commonwealth does not wait to be saved, it waits to be supported. Fallout 4 emphasizes this distinction subtly, allowing the listener to sense the difference through changes in tone rather than explicit narrative shifts. The deeper layers of the world reveal themselves through small discoveries rather than major revelations. A holotape found beneath a bed reveals a voice filled with hope moments before the war. A terminal entry records a decision that seemed minor at the time, but shaped lives forever. A skeleton lies curled beside a suitcase, frozen in the act of choosing between escape and staying behind. These fragments do not form a single story. They exist independently, like memories scattered across the land, each one asking only to be noticed. Technology continues to persist in quiet, often unintended ways. Elevators still function in buildings long abandoned. Lights flicker on and off in patterns no one remembers programming. Automated voices announce schedules that have not mattered in centuries. Fallout 4 presents these systems not as marvels, but as echoes, remnants of a world that valued order even as it unraveled. Interacting with them feels less like control and more like conversation with the past. The question of identity continues to surface gently through encounters with synths and those who fear them. Some people live their entire lives unaware of their origins, content in their routines, defined by relationships rather than manufacture. Others live in constant anxiety, afraid that discovery will erase everything they are. Fallout 4 allows these stories to coexist without forcing resolution, reinforcing the idea that identity is shaped more by lived experience than by creation. The Institute's philosophy becomes clearer the more it is observed from the outside. Their belief in long-term planning and controlled outcomes contrasts sharply with the Commonwealth's reliance on adaptability and improvisation. The Institute seeks perfection through isolation, believing distance ensures preservation. The surface world seeks survival through connection, accepting imperfection as inevitable. Fallout 4 places these visions side by side without declaring a winner, allowing the listener to sit with the tension rather than resolve it. Within the Institute, routines are precise, efficient, and calm. Life proceeds without interruption, yet there is an emptiness beneath the order, a sense that something essential has been traded away for stability. Conversations feel measured, emotions restrained. Fallout 4 conveys this atmosphere subtly through pacing and silence rather than overt commentary. The Institute's world is not cruel, it is distant, and that distance carries its own cost. Meanwhile, on the surface, life remains unpredictable but deeply human. Mistakes are made, conflicts arise, settlements fail and rebuild, relationships form and fracture. Fallout 4 treats these fluctuations not as flaws, but as defining features of humanity's persistence. The Commonwealth survives not because it is controlled, but because it adapts, learning through experience rather than avoiding it. Companions continue to shape the journey quietly. Their presence turns long walks into shared experiences, their comments grounding abstract themes in personal perspective. Some reflect on loss, others on loyalty, some on the difficulty of choosing a path in a world with no clear direction. These conversations never demand attention. They arrive softly, offering insight without urgency. The Brotherhood of Steel remains a constant force, their discipline cutting through the Commonwealth's ambiguity with firm lines and clear doctrine. Their patrols bring a sense of order that feels reassuring to some and oppressive to others. Fallout 4 allows both responses to exist, understanding that security and control are often intertwined. The Brotherhood's certainty offers clarity, but clarity comes at the cost of flexibility. Despite these competing forces, the world continues to provide moments of unexpected calm. Watching fog roll through marshland at dawn, sitting quietly inside a settlement as rain taps against metal roofs, listening to distant gunfire fade without approaching. These moments are not interruptions, they are the connective tissue of the experience, reminding the listener that life continues even when nothing significant happens. The radio remains a gentle constant, its songs drifting across the Commonwealth like memories carried on the wind. The music does not erase the ruins, it softens them. It allows joy and loss to coexist without contradiction. Fallout 4 understands the power of sound to shape emotion, using it to create comfort without denying reality. As the sole survivor moves forward, the journey becomes less about searching for something lost and more about choosing how to exist within what remains. The Commonwealth does not offer closure. It offers continuity, a chance to keep moving, to keep helping, to keep listening. Fallout 4 never insists on resolution. It allows the listener to rest within uncertainty, trusting that meaning emerges through experience rather than conclusion. Night falls once more, settling gently over the land. Lights glow softly in distant settlements. The wind moves through broken structures with a familiar sound. The world feels held together by quiet effort rather than force. In these moments, the Commonwealth feels almost peaceful, not because it is healed, but because it has learned how to endure. The journey continues without urgency, guided by familiarity rather than fear. The ruins no longer feel like reminders of what was lost, but like foundations for something still unfolding. Fallout 4 becomes less a story to finish and more a place to inhabit, offering rest, reflection, and the gentle understanding that even in a broken world, life continues to move forward slowly, patiently, and without asking for permission. And as the path stretches onward, the Commonwealth remains open, waiting not for answers, but for presence, for someone willing to walk its roads, listen to its silences, and drift alongside its quiet persistence, allowing the world to speak in its own time, at its own pace. The Commonwealth carries on in its quiet way, as though it has grown used to being observed rather than judged. The land no longer feels like something that needs to be conquered or understood all at once. It simply exists, patient and enduring, revealing itself slowly to anyone willing to move at its pace. The sole survivor walks through this world with a sense of belonging that once felt impossible, no longer an intruder from another time, but a participant in a story that continues to unfold without urgency. The ruins seem to breathe differently now. Buildings once perceived as hollow shells feel grounded, anchored by the lives that pass through them and the ones that still linger nearby. A collapsed diner hums faintly as wind moves through broken windows. An old neighborhood creaks softly as metal scraps shift with temperature changes. These sounds are subtle, easy to miss, yet they form a constant backdrop that makes the world feel alive rather than abandoned. Fallout 4 excels in these quiet details, allowing atmosphere to carry meaning where dialogue is unnecessary. As familiarity grows, the Commonwealth's geography begins to feel less random and more intentional. Hills offer vantage points that invite pause rather than strategy. Rivers guide movement naturally, their slow currents reflecting the sky in muted colors. Forests reclaim suburbs gently, their roots threading through cracked foundations like careful stitches. Even the glowing sea, harsh and inhospitable, feels purposeful in its isolation, a place shaped by consequence rather than malice. Each region holds its own mood, its own rhythm, encouraging observation rather than haste. Life within settlements continues to mature in subtle ways. Conversations feel less guarded. Laughter surfaces occasionally, brief and soft, but genuine. Children run through open spaces with a confidence that suggests a future not entirely defined by fear. These moments do not erase hardship, but they coexist with it, offering balance. Fallout 4 never suggests that the world has healed. It suggests only that people have learned how to live within its wounds. Leadership in this world feels less like command and more like stewardship. Influence is earned through consistency, through presence that reassures rather than dominates. The sole survivor's role becomes increasingly understated, marked not by titles or authority, but by recognition, a nod from a guard, a greeting from a trader, a quiet thank you spoken without expectation. These acknowledgments carry weight precisely because they are small, reinforcing the idea that trust grows through accumulation rather than declaration. The Commonwealth's factions continue to coexist in uneasy balance. The Brotherhood of Steel maintains its rigid order, their patrols steady and purposeful. Their airship looms on the horizon, a constant reminder of structure and discipline. To some, it symbolizes safety. To others, it represents control. Fallout 4 allows these interpretations to exist simultaneously, never insisting on a single truth. The Brotherhood's presence brings clarity, but clarity does not always bring comfort. The railroad moves invisibly through the same spaces, operating within the margins, their work defined by discretion rather than dominance. Their efforts rarely change the world in obvious ways, yet they alter lives profoundly. Each person helped carries a ripple of consequence that spreads quietly outward. Fallout 4 treats these actions with restraint, emphasizing personal impact over spectacle, reinforcing the idea that resistance does not always need to be loud to be meaningful. The Institute remains distant yet central, its influence felt more than seen. Its philosophy contrasts sharply with the surface world's improvisation. Where the Commonwealth adapts, the Institute controls. Where settlers accept uncertainty, the Institute seeks predictability. Fallout 4 presents this contrast not as a battle between good and evil, but as a divergence in values shaped by environment. Isolation bred precision, exposure bred resilience. Neither path is free from cost. The question of identity continues to surface gently through encounters that linger in the mind long after they pass. People define themselves by work, relationships, memory, and routine. Synths, whether aware of their nature or not, do the same. Fallout 4 allows these parallels to exist quietly, encouraging reflection rather than confrontation. The line between human and artificial becomes less important than the choices individuals make within their circumstances. As the journey stretches on, the idea of home shifts subtly. It is no longer a place tied to the past, no longer sanctuary as it once was. Home becomes wherever routine exists, wherever familiarity settles in. A settlement at dusk, a companion's voice during travel, a radio song playing softly through static. Fallout 4 reframes home as an experience rather than a location, shaped by presence and continuity rather than memory alone. The world continues to offer moments of stillness that feel almost intentional, standing on a bridge as fog drifts below, watching birds circle above, ruins reclaimed by trees, listening to distant thunder roll across open land. These moments ask for nothing. They do not advance the story or resolve conflict. They simply exist, allowing the listener to rest within the environment rather than push through it. Technology remains scattered throughout the Commonwealth, persistent but subdued. It no longer dominates life as it once did. Instead, it blends into the background, serving where it can and failing quietly where it cannot. A generator powers a single light. A terminal stores messages no one will answer. A robot continues a task long past its relevance. Fallout 4 treats these remnants with gentle neutrality, neither condemning nor celebrating them. They are part of the world now, as natural as rusted steel and cracked asphalt. Companions remain steady presences, their observations evolving as the journey continues. They speak less of fear and more of acceptance, less of survival and more of purpose. Their stories intertwine with the Commonwealth's broader narrative, grounding abstract themes in lived experience. Fallout 4 uses these relationships to remind the listener that no journey is truly solitary, even in a vast and fractured world. The search that once defined the journey feels quieter now, not resolved, but reframed. The urgency has softened into understanding. Fallout 4 allows this shift to occur naturally, without forcing emotional beats or dramatic closure. Time has reshaped expectations, teaching patience where desperation once ruled. The world does not rush answers, it allows them to emerge when they are ready. As evening settles across the land, the Commonwealth glows softly in pockets of light. Settlements hum with quiet activity. The sky deepens into rich hues as stars emerge faintly through lingering haze. The air cools. The world feels held together by routine and care rather than force. Fallout 4 thrives in these moments, allowing the listener to feel calm without denying complexity. The path forward remains open, stretching into the distance without demand. There is no final destination waiting just beyond the horizon, only continuation, only movement shaped by choice rather than necessity. The Commonwealth does not promise peace, but it offers presence. It invites the listener to walk its roads, listen to its silences, and rest within its rhythms. In this quiet persistence, Fallout 4 becomes something more than a story about the end of the world. It becomes a meditation on living after endings, on finding steadiness amid uncertainty, on allowing meaning to form slowly rather than forcing it into shape. The ruins remain, the scars endure, but life continues, carried gently forward by those willing to stay, to build, and to listen. And as the journey moves onward, unhurried and open-ended, the Commonwealth remains what it has always been beneath the ash and steel, a place shaped by memory, sustained by effort, and softened by time, waiting patiently for anyone willing to drift alongside it, step by step, into whatever comes next. The Commonwealth moves forward quietly, guided less by meaning and more by momentum, as though the world has learned that survival does not always require direction, it simply requires continuation. The sole survivor walks familiar paths now, roads once foreign, now etched gently into memory. There is comfort in this familiarity, not because the land has grown safer, but because it has become readable. The way shadows stretch across broken streets at dusk, the way distant gunfire echoes and then fades without approaching, the way the wind settles into a low hush just before night fully arrives. These patterns form a language the world speaks fluently, one learned not through instruction, but through time. With this understanding comes a quieter sense of responsibility. No longer driven by urgency, the sole survivor becomes someone who responds rather than reacts. Needs are noticed before they are spoken. Settlements feel less like objectives and more like neighbors. The act of helping becomes woven into daily movement, something done without announcement or expectation. Fallout 4 frames this transition gently, allowing purpose to emerge organically rather than through command or destiny. The land itself seems to respond to this steadiness. Areas once avoided feel approachable. Long abandoned places invite exploration without resistance. Even danger feels predictable, no longer startling but manageable, like a storm that can be read by the way clouds gather. Fallout 4 does not remove threat from the world. It reframes it as something that exists alongside calm rather than replacing it. In the quiet corners of the Commonwealth, untouched spaces reveal themselves slowly. Old parks overtaken by trees, libraries sealed behind collapsed entrances, neighborhoods where nothing has moved in decades. These places feel suspended in time, preserved not by intention, but by neglect. Entering them feels like stepping into a held breath. Fallout 4 allows these moments to remain unremarked, trusting the listener to feel their weight without explanation. Memory continues to linger everywhere, not as something overwhelming, but as something ambient. A holotape plays a voice filled with warmth and expectation. A terminal displays a final entry, written without knowing it would be the last. A child's toy rests where it fell, never reclaimed. These details do not demand grief. They offer presence. They remind the listener that life existed fully before it ended, and that fullness still matters. Technology, once the defining force of the old world, now feels secondary. It supports where it can, fails where it must, and rarely draws attention to itself. A single working elevator becomes remarkable not because of what it does, but because of what it represents: continuity without purpose. Fallout 4 treats these moments softly, allowing them to exist as background texture rather than spectacle. The Institute's vision remains unchanged, steady in its belief that control ensures survival. Yet from the surface, that certainty feels distant, almost abstract. The Commonwealth's reality is shaped by improvisation, by adapting to conditions as they change, rather than trying to eliminate uncertainty entirely. Fallout 4 places these philosophies side by side, not as opposing forces locked in battle, but as parallel paths shaped by environment and experience. Synths continue to live quietly among the surface world, many unaware of their origins, others burdened by the knowledge. Their lives unfold much like anyone else's, marked by work, relationships, small joys, and quiet fears. Fallout 4 allows these stories to exist without emphasis, reinforcing the idea that identity is not something announced, but something lived. The question of what defines a person remains unanswered, left intentionally open. Companions remain steady presences, their commentary evolving with familiarity. Early caution gives way to reflection. Observations become softer, more introspective. They speak less of danger and more of meaning, less of survival and more of belonging. These moments do not interrupt the journey. They blend into it, like conversations carried on during long walks, valued not for information, but for connection. The Brotherhood of Steel continues its patrols, unwavering in doctrine, confident in structure. Their presence brings a sense of order that contrasts sharply with the Commonwealth's organic flow. Fallout 4 allows this contrast to breathe, showing how certainty can be both stabilizing and restrictive. The Brotherhood offers answers. The Commonwealth offers questions. Neither is presented as complete. Nightfall arrives gently, spreading across the land with familiar calm. Lights flicker on in settlements, creating pockets of warmth in the darkness. Voices carry softly through the air, unhurried, grounded. Fires crackle. The world feels held together by repetition rather than force. Fallout 4 thrives in these moments, allowing stillness to exist without interruption. The radio continues to play, its songs drifting through ruins and fields alike. The optimism in the music feels neither ironic nor naive. It feels sincere, a reminder that joy once existed and can exist again, even if differently. Fallout 4 uses sound not to escape reality, but to soften its edges, creating emotional continuity across time. The sole survivor's journey no longer feels like a search. It feels like participation. The Commonwealth does not need to be understood fully to be lived in. It asks only presence, patience, and attention. Fallout 4 honors this by allowing the story to stretch outward without demanding resolution, trusting the listener to find meaning in experience rather than conclusion. The land continues to offer quiet moments that feel almost intentional, watching clouds drift across broken skylines, sitting beside a settlement wall as the night deepens, listening to the distant hum of generators blending with insect sounds. These moments do not advance plot. They deepen immersion. They allow rest. As the path stretches onward, the future remains undefined, open, and unforced. The Commonwealth does not promise answers or endings. It offers continuity. It offers space to exist, to help, to reflect. Fallout 4 becomes less a narrative to complete and more a world to inhabit, one that rewards slowing down rather than rushing forward. In this calm persistence, the world feels whole in its brokenness. The ruins remain, the scars endure, but life continues, shaped by care, memory, and quiet resilience. And as the sole survivor keeps moving, step by step, without urgency or expectation, the Commonwealth walks alongside, steady and patient, unfolding gently into whatever comes next. The Commonwealth greets the next stretch of the journey with the same quiet patience it has learned over centuries of survival. Nothing announces a new chapter. There is no clear turning point, no dramatic shift in tone. Instead, the world continues exactly as it is, and that continuity itself becomes meaningful. The sole survivor moves through familiar territory with an ease shaped by repetition, no longer scanning every rooftop with suspicion, no longer startled by every distant sound. Awareness replaces fear, and with it comes a deeper sense of calm, as though the land has finally accepted this presence as part of its ongoing rhythm. The roads feel worn in a comforting way now, their cracks and bends mapped not just in memory but in instinct. There are stretches where footsteps fall into an unthinking cadence, where the mind drifts freely while the body moves forward on its own. Fallout 4 allows these moments to exist without interruption, encouraging the listener to feel the passage of space rather than rush through it. The world no longer demands attention at every moment. It trusts that attention will come naturally. Settlements continue to evolve quietly in the background. Small improvements accumulate without ceremony. A new guard post stands where there was once an open gap. Crops grow in tighter rows. Water flows more steadily. These changes are rarely dramatic, but they are persistent, and persistence matters more than perfection in the Commonwealth. People notice when things work. They notice when someone returns. Trust builds slowly, reinforced not by promises, but by consistency. The idea of safety becomes less absolute and more contextual. No place is truly secure, yet some places feel reliable in their unpredictability. Residents understand the risks and accept them without panic. Children play within sight of walls. Merchants linger a little longer during trade. Fallout 4 presents this quiet normalization of danger, not as complacency, but as adaptation. The world has not grown gentler. People have grown steadier. Exploration continues to reward patience rather than ambition. The most meaningful discoveries are often small and easily overlooked. A note tucked into a desk drawer, a recording left behind without expectation of being heard, a personal effect placed carefully beside a skeleton rather than scattered in panic. These details tell stories, not of the apocalypse itself, but of how people chose to face it. Fallout 4 does not frame these moments as tragedy or triumph. It allows them to exist as they are, incomplete and human. Nature continues its slow reclamation, softening the Commonwealth's harsher edges. Trees grow through collapsed roofs. Grass pushes up through asphalt. Wildlife adapts, finding balance in a world reshaped by radiation and time. There is a strange beauty in this coexistence, in the way decay and growth intertwine without conflict. Fallout 4 leans into this quiet harmony, reminding the listener that the world did not end. It changed, and change carries its own form of life. Technology remains present but subdued, no longer the centerpiece of existence. Machines work quietly where they still can, failing without protest where they cannot. A generator hums steadily. A terminal flickers on long enough to display a message that no longer matters. A robot continues its route, unaware that its purpose dissolved centuries ago. These moments feel less like warnings and more like reflections, echoes of intention lingering without demand. The Institute's influence feels clearer now, not because it has grown stronger, but because it has become easier to contextualize. From a distance, its logic is precise and orderly, built on long-term planning and controlled outcomes. Yet from the surface, that order feels fragile in its own way, dependent on isolation and detachment. Fallout 4 does not force a confrontation between these perspectives. It allows them to exist in parallel, inviting contemplation rather than judgment. Synths continue to move quietly through the world, their lives shaped by the same routines as anyone else's. They work, rest, worry, hope. Some carry the weight of knowing what they are. Others never learn, living full lives defined entirely by experience. Fallout 4 treats these stories with restraint, allowing empathy to grow naturally rather than through revelation. The question of identity remains open, unresolved, gently persistent. Companions feel increasingly like part of the landscape rather than additions to it. Their presence blends into the journey, their voice is familiar, their silence is comfortable. Conversations no longer feel like exchanges of information, but shared moments that require no response. Fallout 4 understands the value of quiet companionship, of simply moving through space together without explanation. The Brotherhood of Steel remains a constant structure against the Commonwealth's fluidity. Their doctrine does not waver, their patrols continue with precision, their confidence is unshaken by ambiguity. For some, this certainty provides reassurance. For others, it feels restrictive. Fallout 4 allows both feelings to coexist, recognizing that order and freedom often pull in opposite directions. Even so, the world does not feel divided so much as layered. Different philosophies overlap without fully colliding, shaping the Commonwealth through tension rather than resolution. The land absorbs these influences and continues on, indifferent to ideology, responsive only to action and time. Fallout 4 places the listener within this layered reality, encouraging observation over intervention. Moments of stillness grow more frequent, or perhaps more noticeable. Standing on a ridge, as fog settles into low ground, watching lights appear one by one across a distant settlement. Listening to wind move through skeletal structures with a sound that feels almost musical. These moments do not mark progress, they mark presence. They offer rest. The radio continues to play, its songs now deeply familiar, like old companions. Their optimism no longer contrasts sharply with the world. Instead, it feels integrated, part of the Commonwealth's emotional landscape. Fallout 4 uses this familiarity to create comfort, allowing sound to anchor the listener gently within the experience. The sole survivor's journey no longer feels defined by goals or destinations. It feels defined by movement itself, by choosing to keep walking, to keep helping where possible, to keep listening. The Commonwealth does not reward this choice with certainty or closure. It rewards it with continuity. As night settles once more, the land grows quiet in a way that feels earned rather than imposed. Fires burn low. Guards speak softly. The sky stretches overhead, vast and indifferent, yet somehow reassuring. Fallout 4 excels in these moments, allowing the world to simply exist without narrative pressure. The future remains open, undefined, unforced. The past rests where it belongs, woven into the landscape rather than pressing forward. The present unfolds slowly, shaped by small decisions and steady presence. Fallout 4 does not rush toward an ending. It allows the journey to breathe. And as the path continues onward, familiar yet always changing, the Commonwealth remains what it has quietly become, a place not of answers, but of endurance. A world shaped by memory, sustained by effort, softened by time, a place where life continues, not loudly or triumphantly, but gently, persistently, and without asking permission. The Commonwealth continues to unfold with the same unhurried patience, as though it has long since stopped measuring progress in milestones, and instead learned to value the simple act of continuation. The sole survivor moves through this world with a quiet confidence now, not the confidence of dominance, but of familiarity. There is a comfort in knowing where roads tend to bend, where danger often sleeps, and where calm can usually be found if one waits long enough. The land no longer surprises as often, and when it does, the surprise feels manageable, folded gently into experience rather than fear. Days pass in a steady rhythm that feels almost soothing. Morning light filters through broken skylines, catching on rusted metal and cracked glass, turning ruin into something briefly beautiful. The afternoons settle into warmth and stillness, interrupted only by distant movement or the low hum of machinery that never quite shuts down. Evenings arrive softly, shadows stretching long across the ground, inviting slower steps and quieter thoughts. Fallout 4 allows these cycles to exist without urgency, letting time feel expansive rather than pressing. Settlements feel more alive in these moments, not because they have grown dramatically, but because their routines have settled into something dependable. Guards know their posts. Crops are tended without panic. Conversations happen without constant suspicion. There is still danger, still loss, but it no longer defines every interaction. People have learned how to live alongside uncertainty, how to leave space for both caution and hope. Fallout 4 captures this balance gently, never overstating it, allowing the listener to sense stability through atmosphere rather than explanation. The act of traveling between these places becomes almost meditative. The steady sound of footsteps, the creak of armor or fabric, the distant call of mutated wildlife blending into the background. Long stretches pass where nothing significant happens, and those stretches feel intentional. They create room for thought, for reflection, for simply being present in the world. Fallout 4 understands that rest is not the absence of story, but part of its structure. Memory remains embedded everywhere, but it feels softer now, less sharp. The Commonwealth no longer feels like it is constantly mourning. Instead, it feels like it has learned how to carry its past without being overwhelmed by it. Old world signs fade into the scenery. Forgotten advertisements become textures rather than reminders. The ruins are still there, but they no longer dominate the emotional landscape. Fallout 4 allows this shift to happen naturally, without commentary, trusting the listener to feel it. Technology continues its quiet persistence, functioning where it can, failing where it must. A light flickers on at dusk, in a place where no one remembers wiring it. A terminal hums faintly before going dark again. A robot pauses mid-task, then resumes, unaware that its purpose no longer exists. These moments feel less eerie and more contemplative, as though the world itself is reflecting on what remains when intention fades but motion continues. The Institute's presence, once heavy with mystery, now feels more like a distant constant. Its philosophy is understood, even if it is not accepted. It represents a version of humanity that chose control over connection, precision over adaptation. From the surface, that choice feels cold, but not incomprehensible. Fallout 4 presents this understanding calmly, allowing empathy without agreement, recognition without endorsement. Synths remain woven into the fabric of the Commonwealth, their lives unfolding quietly alongside everyone else's. Some are known, some are hidden, some will never know themselves. Their stories are not framed as crises, but as lives lived under unusual circumstances. Fallout 4's restraint here is intentional, allowing identity to remain something personal rather than political, something felt rather than declared. Companionship continues to shape the journey in subtle ways. Silence shared during long walks feels comfortable rather than awkward. Occasional comments carry more weight because they are rare. Observations about the world feel reflective instead of reactive. Fallout 4 uses these relationships to soften the experience, reminding the listener that even in vast, broken spaces, connection persists quietly. The Brotherhood of Steel continues its steady presence, unchanged in doctrine and confident in structure. Their patrols move with purpose, their machines gleam against the muted tones of the wasteland. Their certainty remains both reassuring and restrictive, offering order at the cost of flexibility. Fallout 4 allows this tension to remain unresolved, understanding that clarity and compassion rarely align perfectly. The railroad's influence continues unseen, their work measured in lives altered rather than territories claimed. Their success is quiet, their losses often invisible. Fallout 4 treats this subtlety with respect, reinforcing the idea that impact does not need to be visible to be meaningful. As the journey stretches onward, the idea of purpose becomes gentler, less defined by objectives and more by presence. Helping no longer feels like obligation. Exploration no longer feels like escape. The sole survivor exists within the Commonwealth, rather than moving against it. Fallout 4 allows this shift to settle slowly, without fanfare, trusting the listener to recognize it. Moments of stillness become increasingly precious. Standing at the edge of a settlement as night falls, watching distant lights flicker on and off across the horizon. Listening to the wind move through skeletal remains of buildings in a sound that feels almost like breath. These moments ask nothing, they offer rest. The radio continues to hum softly through it all, its songs now deeply familiar, almost comforting. The optimism they carry no longer feels out of place. Instead, it feels like a quiet agreement between past and present, a shared understanding that joy can exist even in altered forms. Fallout 4 uses this familiarity to create emotional continuity, anchoring the listener gently in the experience. The world does not rush toward resolution. It stretches outward, open and patient. The Commonwealth does not promise clarity or peace. It offers space to walk, to help, to listen, to exist. Fallout 4 embraces this openness, allowing the journey to continue without insisting on an ending. As night deepens once more, the land settles into its familiar hush. Fires burn low, guards speak quietly. The sky opens wide above everything, vast and indifferent, yet strangely comforting. The ruins remain, but they no longer feel heavy. They feel like part of the landscape, woven into a world that has learned how to endure. And so the journey continues, not driven by urgency or destination, but by steady movement and quiet attention. The Commonwealth walks alongside, unchanged yet always shifting, offering its roads, its silences, and its soft persistence to anyone willing to move at its pace. In this gentle continuation, Fallout 4 becomes less a story to finish and more a place to rest. A world that does not demand answers, only presence, patience, and the willingness to keep going.